we've got a repeat guest, Natalie Ross, and we previously have heard her on the show when we were talking about conscious marketing. And I got to meet Natalie in person, and we got to hang out in the Santa Cruz woods earlier this week, and I've asked her back on the show, and your work life has changed quite a bit since the last time we chatted. So I think just for context, to give people an update of what's going on in your world, let's start there. And then we've got so much juicy stuff to talk about.
Sounds good. Hi, Kat. Hi, listeners. Yeah, getting to meet you and be together in the woods, put our feet in the streams and hang out with your puppy Ruby and meet your honey bunny Sean was also awesome. It's like such a gift to get to actually be in real life with people.
Right.
So fun. But yeah, I'm Natalie Ross. Hello. You may know me from the Earth Speak podcast.
You have to put your radio voice on for that one.
I just got to bring out the nerd. Yes.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I've been producing podcasts for many years, and most recently the Earth Speak podcast. And in that, I have been running a community for people who feel connected to earth-based spirituality and animism and magic, and who just want to learn, grow, and share with other people and connect with other people. And I love it. I mean, it has definitely been part of my heart and soul's work. But, you know, it's not, I've realized through some big shifts that have happened in my life and some big trauma integrations and new awarenesses that come with that, I've realized I don't want to be a spiritual teacher. And yeah, I don't want to make my livelihood through spirituality. I have a lot of gifts and I'm grateful for that. And beyond what I've been doing, I love communications, and I've been practicing this a lot in growing my podcast and my business and my communities. And now I'm finally actually taking all of this stuff I've learned from a background of going to school for journalism and actually practicing as a freelance journalist and photojournalist, and spending years growing an audience of tens of thousands of people and millions of podcast downloads from nothing. Taking all this knowledge I've gathered and all this experience and all the successes and fails and insights, and I'm now helping heart-centered change maker entrepreneurs, especially with an animist worldview, who are really into that kinship interconnected perspective. I mean, everything I do is like in this realm. Just caveat, y'all, which if you're here, then you probably are too. But I'm helping these beautiful change makers get clear on what it is they're actually doing, and get clear on how to communicate their messages and how to put that into practice in marketing that's aligned for them and their values and that actually works. And I love it and they love it. I summarize it by saying I help people who help people to help more people by clearly communicating what it is they do and how they can help people. So like we're together creating this change from a paradigm of domination to that kinship paradigm of interconnectedness and honoring the earth and each other as alive, and really unpacking that human supremacy that our current society is so rooted in. And there's not one correct or right way to do this. This is just my little corner of the world and how I feel called to be of service in this way. And yeah, that's what I'm doing now.
I love it. And for those of you out there who are nervous system nerds, when Natalie and I get together, it's just nervous system nerd time. So one of the things that we're going to just sort of follow the flow of this conversation, but one of the things that I definitely wanted to cover is this aspect of nervous system integration and regulation, and how that shows up as blocks and challenges for spiritual entrepreneurs, and how can we move through those things. And I want to ask you to layer on your story, because there's been so much trauma and nervous system integration that I've had the honor of witnessing in you in the last several months. So that's kind of like a big picture bird's eye overview of the conversation, but we're going to get down into the nitty gritty details, and we're also just going to flow and see where the conversation takes us. So thank you so much for just being open to this conversation. I think that your story is so relatable to so many spiritual entrepreneurs out there. And I think that part of the reason why you're able to hold space in this like communications marketing world, because even though your work is around helping people tell their stories and helping people communicate what it is that they do, like you also end up being a grounding presence for them to be able to like work through whatever is coming up for them in that moment, that it's like, oh my gosh, it's so scary to be seen. It's so scary to be heard. Am I allowed to do this? You know, all the like thoughts about imposter syndrome, all these thoughts around, you know, am I lazy because I haven't done this yet? You know, like there's so many things that comes up in this realm, right? So appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me here. I joke that I call myself nervous system Natalie. So, you know, I'm ready to go there.
Yeah. So, you are one of the graduates of Business Alchemist Mentorship, which is my program. It's a 9-month program to help you move through building and really integrating and creating a business that is rooted in cycles and rooted in being able to integrate a lot of the traumas. So I'd love if you could just give us a peek into what it was like when we first met and why it was that you were like, ooh, I'm feeling called to do this work.
Yes. So I think we have a very unusual way of how we met and how I ended up working with you, because you actually applied to teach a workshop through EarthSpeak, because we were doing monthly workshops. And when my business partner, Shauna, and I read your application, we were both instantly like, hell yes. Like you were so clear and it was so aligned with our mission, with the, you know, being rooted in nature and helping people heal trauma through working with their nervous systems and not overriding themselves and tapping into intuition. All of this, we were like, yes, bring it. So I remember when I interviewed you. So whenever we have a workshop special teacher, we have them on the podcast, the EarthSpeak podcast as well. So y'all listening can go listen to Kat on my podcast and get some more cat love. But I interviewed you, and I remember that day, it was like the first time we ever met. And I asked you, just in my kind of routine questions that I ask my guests, I'm like, what do you have coming up that you want to talk about or promote? Because I really love helping people help people. And I've been
even back
this.
then. Yeah. Even back then you were doing this.
Pretty much everything I've been doing is helping people help people in one way or another, and just finding where's my place in that I really thrive. And you mentioned, you're like, well, when's this going to go out? And, you know, it wasn't going to go out for a little while, but you're like, I have this thing, the doors are closing today. It's this 9-month mentorship that's really about helping business owners move through what's holding them back, not by overriding, but by moving aligned with the seasons as seen through the Taoist lens, which you have a lot of experience in from your background as an acupuncturist. And, you know, this Taoism is an animistic perspective. It's very rooted in the living world, the living universe. And I had been praying and asking the universe for a coach or guide or someone to freaking help me. And when you shared that you were doing this, I was like, okay, we don't have time to, you know, the doors close tomorrow for that, and the podcast isn't going out for a few weeks, but tell me more, please. And by the end of that conversation, I was, as you say, nervous sighted. I was like, oh, well, I don't know if this is okay for me to do, but it feels so right. And something in me is saying yes. And it wasn't that like urgent FOMO yes. It was like this is the answer to my prayers, yes. And I was like, okay, I see you. You're throwing me the lifeblood I've been asking for, universe. And so I signed up. And I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to afford it or if my nervous system was going to have the capacity to engage with the process, because I have a history of being really debilitated by freeze and a deep shutdown mode. And so I've been very cautious, like coaches and programs that are a lot of hype and a lot of energy are way too stimulating for me. I cannot do it. And so your energy, your presence, all of this really appealed to me, and the approach you took. And what I was struggling with was, I had been working in EarthSpeak and for a couple of years, and we had become a six-figure business. How an earth-based, creating a community for earth-based spirituality had become this six-figure business. But because of my own really intricate whack trauma, I was not allowing myself to get paid. And the time had come for that to stop, but I couldn't actually, even though I was in therapy for a year and a half, somatic therapy for a year and a half, which had tremendous help, I was still like, I need someone to help me who will help me through this lens of business and money and be able to do that somatically, because I'm full on into somatics and in the body and the nervous system, and your knowledge of that and approach with that made sense to me. And I knew enough and had enough experience to be like, yes, that's the way for me. And I just, with my therapist, I talked pretty much every session was like about money, because, with that, of course, went down into like family dynamics and childhood experiences and trauma and and we'd been unpacking this for a long time, but it was still like, oh, this piece was just heavy and looming, and there was pressure in my marriage and pressure in my business, and like I was just burned out. I was like, I'm done. I can't keep doing this. Like, I have to get paid, but something in me is fighting at all costs not to.
Yeah.
And it was hard.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely.
Yeah. I thought I was going to come into this business and into BAM and be like, okay, how are we going to make EarthSpeak work to make money? That was what I was like, okay, how do we help me integrate this and help EarthSpeak grow the way I need it to grow, and the vision that we hold for it. So,
And that's been something that I've noticed with a lot of the members of BAM is when we are in such a deep state of shutdown, we can't really even see that we might not be aligned with our path, right? And so that place that we got to meet each other was just this like perfect precipice where you had done so much of your own work prior to us meeting. And it was just prime for us to go in with this like laser focus of, okay, so the thing that we're identifying is Natalie has a money block, and Natalie's not allowing herself to make money in this six-figure business. And so how do we untangle that? Because it wasn't about like, oh, we need to get more income out of EarthSpeak for you. It was really about how can we remove that barrier of shutdown so that you can see a more clear path for yourself, and you can see where things may not have been aligned, or maybe you've been overdoing and over giving in certain spaces. And we need to work on that receiving piece, which is such a hard thing for people who are in that shutdown fight or flight mode, because it doesn't feel safe to receive, right? And so I think that place that we got to meet was just like, and this is the sort of people that I want to continue to call into BAM is people who are aware enough to be like, okay, so me procrastinating, that's not actually me being lazy. I wonder what's at the root of that. I wonder why, and how far back does that story go, and how is my body experiencing this as a threat? And so in those spaces, giving you more how-to tools is going to be uber overwhelming.
Yeah, I did not want that.
Yeah.
I was like, I need some guidance and structure and framework, but it's not about like, let me put myself in another how-to.
Yeah, exactly. Because your nervous system has, like, you already know how to, right? Like, somebody could logically look at you and be like, you just need to start paying yourself, Natalie.
Right.
Why don't you just, and anytime anybody says, like, why don't you just, I'm like, There's an override that's about to be spoken at the end of that sentence.
Yes.
And so for you, it was like, okay, so I'm going to do that brave work of looking at some of my relationships in childhood, looking at how money was perceived in childhood, looking at where I was or wasn't allowed to be nourished. And that was the piece that needed to be worked on so that you could then change and shift your external world to match your internal world.
Right. Yeah.
And so I would love to hear about what it was about being in, because one of the aspects of BAM is community. Mm-hmm. And that's something that I know that you hold near and dear to your heart. So like, what was it about community that helped your nervous system, and why that community piece was important for you?
I mean, community is so important in general. And I see this in my life, in my, in Earthspeak, in my spiritual community, and then in BAM community, in every community, because of co-regulation. And so, for folks who don't know what that is, it's when we, humans get together and their nervous systems are so unconsciously noticing the other people's nervous systems and seeing whether it's safe, they're feeling safe or threatened. And then we're kind of like co-regulating or co-dysregulating into, taking on like, oh, they feel safe to me, they're feeling safe. Oh, I can actually like settle in a little bit. And I think that's huge. Like there's so much self-help out there that's like, just help yourself. And actually part of the role of therapy and is to have someone who is well regulated that your nervous system can unconsciously learn from. And so being in community is always so helpful for this co-regulation piece. Like this is core to who we are, how we're wired biologically.
Yeah.
And for me personally in BAM, being in community was really fun because I got to see so many different types of businesses and people's journeys, like at different points than where I was, but seeing them move through similar things, either things I hadn't been through or things I was very familiar with, and just being able to kind of experience that activation and like deactivation through their story myself kind of helped unwind some layers I was holding. And it's just fun. It's inspiring to be with other people and to hear their vulnerable truths and to be heard and witnessed by other people who aren't going to judge you and who are actually going to celebrate you. And one thing, we all reflected back to each other things that were really helpful about, and this wasn't something that you like told us to do. It was just like how our community evolved of like, oh, actually this is really insightful and helpful. I love how you ... Like this, I think this happened for everyone. Like everyone got reflections back about that because sometimes it's hardest to see yourself because you're so in it that you're like, is this even valuable? Like in what I'm thinking or wanting to do or saying even making sense or I don't know, worth it to anyone? And other people be like, oh my gosh, I've never thought of it that way. That helped change everything. Like, these reflections are so necessary. Like there's so much focus in our domination society on doing it yourself and succeeding and getting ahead and like being this isolated pillar of success. But that's just not, I don't know, that's not sustainable or realistic, especially to people who have trauma. So, yeah.
And that's the piece too, I think is important to note is that like when people have trauma and are deep in their trauma wounds, they don't want to be in community.
Oh,
they want to isolate.
They want to isolate, or I've witnessed this in my community, is they deeply crave that connection and belonging, but the very act of being with other people is way too stimulating, and then they shut down again. In fact, and that's just like this misattunement in their nervous systems because of trauma. And even though they feel like it's safer to isolate, which I am very well aware of this because it's been my own pattern as well. And even though they're craving community, these things are at odds because our bodies need community and connection.
Yeah.
And they're going to drive us towards it. And if we have trauma around that and it's scary and activating and we don't know how to be with that, then we're just going to be in this looping forever. So yeah, I mean, I see this again and again, and I have seen this hundreds of times now.
Absolutely. And the word that I, as you were speaking, that was coming to mind was the word mirror. Mm-hmm. And like on a biological level, we have mirror neurons where, you know, this is how we create like biological empathy, is when we have one mirror neuron reflecting another person's mirror neuron. I think that this is where that co-regulation piece is while you're in your dysregulation, if I can hold an anchor and be a safe place for you, then it allows for your mirror neurons to be like, oh, that's actually safe. I can do that too.
Yeah.
And when we're in community and there are 6 other people, 7 other people, 8 other people who are holding that safe space and mirroring safety for you, then it gives your nervous system a chance to be like, oh, there's an example. I'm going to take that. And I think that's why I see this over and over again. And I say this all the time of like, there's something super magical that I can't recreate in a one-on-one setting that always seems to happen in a group setting. And you're nodding along too, because I know that you're also a group facilitator. And it's just like, I can't really explain why that happens, but this is why I think that like group work needs to be integral to trauma healing work. You can't expect to do this on your own, because we are herd animals that evolved mirror neurons because group meant safety. And then also, like, that's like sort of like the biological lens of it. But then on the emotional lens of it, what I saw over and over again in these BAM group ceremonies was folks who were like, I thought I was being crazy. And as soon as they voice it out loud and everyone else in the group is like, girl, that's normal. Like, we start normalizing these things that seem so huge in our minds. Yeah. And it sort of takes the sympathetic edge off of it, so that you can then look at it as like coming from a neutral space of, oh, this is actually normal. And so in that normality, how can I move forward and make the best choices for myself?
Yeah, the normalizing is huge. And that happened in one-to-ones and group, the normalizing and having a space to be like, this is really hard right now. And people being like, yeah, that's hard. I've been through that. Like, you're not, it's not happening because you're doing it wrong or you're not enough. It's happening because that's a hard thing that happens in business. And it just doesn't get talked about because it's not shiny and pretty for Instagram.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And when we start normalizing these things, it's like you're pulling the thing that felt like a giant monster from under the rug and looking at it and a lot of times befriending it. You know, a lot of the blocks and the things that we think are like working against us are actually incredibly protective. Oh yeah. And so I'm curious about if you want to share a little bit about like what that protective, you know, things that were coming up for you and how you were able to like make friends with these protective parts of you. Yeah. I mean, in Earthspeak and my whole career up until then, my nervous system was protecting me and keeping me from earning money because that was cross-wired with a belief that earning money would actually take away all of my freedom and it would put me into a miserable bondage, and that it was better to not earn money and be free than to earn money and be in bondage like that, and that I would be miserable. And there was also a belief that I was the cause of other people's problems and misery, and that no matter what I did, even though I was responsible for their misery and was the one who had to, you know, help them not be miserable, no matter what I did,
nothing would ever work to help them not be miserable. And this is all directly from like childhood trauma and developmental trauma stuff that happened because of my parents' own dysregulation. You know, they weren't trying to, neglect or abuse me. It was just they were dysregulated kids as well, basically, with a baby that they didn't know how, I think something that's really important to teach here, just as a kind of side note, that just put off so many light bulbs for me, is learning about how as babies we come into the world with the ability to have these, fight, flight, freeze responses, but we aren't programmed of when they should activate and how to move through them. All of that programming comes from, or not all, but most of that programming comes from our caretakers. And if our caretakers are dysregulated and don't know how to move through sympathetic activation or through a shutdown mode or freeze and come back into emotional safety and regulation, we're not going to learn it either. And I think this is a huge epidemic in our world, is we are just passing down dysregulation to our children, and then they pass it on to their children. And like the line gets broken, that starts to shift every time we or someone learns to get regulated from a place that they were stuck in dysregulation, aka healing trauma. And so my parents were severely dysregulated from their own trauma and did not really know how to take care of me in the way I needed, and did not know how to even take care of themselves as healthy beings. And these are the messages that I grew up with. This is the way my nervous system was wired. And it was trying to protect me all this time by saying, okay, I saw what happened to your parents and what happened to you as a child, and we're going to protect you and keep you safe. And, at least you'll have your freedom and you won't be miserable, even if you have nothing. And even if you have no power, and if you've miserably failed at everything that you were supposed to do, because my whole messaging was, I'm responsible for other people's misery, but nothing I can do will ever change their misery. So might as well just shut down, Like I was in this loop hardcore, and it's hard. I mean, that put me in like basically this permanent shutdown mode for most of my life. And spirituality really helped me get out of that. Really, spirituality was my safe co-regulation for a long time before I found somatics and trauma healing. And that gave me a huge paradigm shift. But yeah, that's where I was coming from, and that messaging that I was carrying in my body. And, it was ultimately a protection response. And cognitively knowing in my thoughts that this was the protection response wasn't enough to actually change it, though. It helped lift up some of the burden and give me some relief. But I was still like, okay, even though I know this, and I had uncovered a lot of this through therapy and through journaling and introspection, and just, the body has an inherent impulse towards health. And since I was in my early 20s, I've asked the question, like, what does it mean to actually be healthy? And that's led me through this crazy journey. I'm 38 now. And so, through this journey, I've uncovered these patterns. And then I was like, okay, finally, like, what do we do with them? So,
Yeah. And something that I want to note here too is the binary stories that our sympathetic arm of the nervous system tells us. Because I'm recalling a conversation that you and I were having like fairly on in our coaching, where you were like, I want to create something, but I want to deliver X, Y, Z, like just like this massive, like massive list of like things you were going to put into like an offering. I can't remember exactly what the offering was.
Sounds like me though.
Yeah. And the story that you were telling yourself is, I have to either give everybody, or I have to give my people everything.
I have to fix all their problems.
Yeah. Not just this like one isolated thing, but like I have to fix everything about their life, or it's not worth it at all.
Yep. That was definitely the A or B, like A or Z, actually, no in between, black or white. Either I have to fix all their problems, or else they've totally wasted their time and money with me if I haven't fixed their whole life. Because that was rooted in that, like, I have to help my parents not be miserable, or else I'm completely worthless and
Exactly.
da-da-da-da-da.
Exactly. And so like oftentimes I talk about like being in a more regulated state in your nervous system as being a creative process. And the reason why I think it's a creative process is that when you're no longer in that binary, this or that, like if you think about these biological processes, because they evolve from like, you need to either run away from the bear or fight the bear. Like there's no like in between. It is just a very clear yes or no sort of answer. And so anytime you go into a binary state of thinking, then that's an indication that you need to check in with yourself and be like, okay, so is my life actually in danger? And if it's not in danger, then we can't be making decisions from this place, because it's not a very creative place to be making decisions from. And when we're talking about our businesses and all of the things that come out of your business and how you want your business to be infused with creativity, what needs to happen before you can tap into creativity is you have to tap into your parasympathetic nervous system, because your parasympathetic part allows for that nuance, that gray, to be uncovered. And so for you, being able to calm your nervous system down and regulate and integrate this story around, I either need to, you know, fix everything about my mom's life or nothing at all, or I need to fix everything about my client's life or nothing at all, has allowed you to find this amazing niche that you're so good at.
Thanks.
And like, really,
and I love it.
Yeah. I mean, full disclosure, Natalie is so good at this that I've asked her to help me co-teach conscious marketing with me. Next cycle of BAM, I've hired her to coach the BAM members around how to write a sales page. And I have hired her to write my personal sales page for BAM. So like,
no big deal.
So, you know, if you were trying to solve everything in my life, I wouldn't have hired you.
Oh my God. And it wouldn't even be possible. You know, that's the loop.
Yeah. And so being able to like, I think people have a lot of resistance to niching down. And I think this is part of the like piece around why niching down feels so threatening.
Oh yeah.
Is because you have this like old story and you're looking at it as like a this or that.
Oh yeah.
You know?
And it's rooted in that subconscious, that unconscious. It's not like you can just change your thoughts and now it's better. It's like, no, it's in your body from how you were wired as a baby, as a child, and that is the program you're running on.
Yeah.
But it can change.
Exactly. And like, this is the beautiful thing that I love about witnessing people going through BAM is like, you've always had this medicine inside of you. Like you've always been like, it's not like I, you know, taught classes on copywriting to the group and you were like, well, I'm going to do this and like make it better. Like this is who you inherently were. This is where your talents lie. You're a very, very good writer. But it was the subconscious blocks and the trauma and like all of the things that were in the way. And so it's amazing to see when you lift it almost feels like, you know, you're breaking open the dam.
Oh, definitely.
You know, and then from that place, it's like, oh, creation can happen from this place. And, and so to me, the most fun part is like, okay, like you've worked through your traumas now. And, you know, because you're a human being and because we're all human beings, you're going to continue to work through your traumas.
Right. It's a never ending fun journey.
It is. It's like the never ending gobstopper of candy. But as you're doing that, like you uncover more and more and more layers. And I don't know about you, but like for me, when I have these things come up now, it's like I get to look at it with like curiosity and almost have like a little bit of fun with it.
Yeah.
Of like, oh, I see you. I see you overworking, you know, and I see where that's coming from. Okay, so like let's see where you feel like you're under threat right now. And how can we help you come into regulation again? Because life isn't that fun when you're in fight or flight mode.
Or shutdown. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Fight, flight, shutdown. Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Oh, it sucks. It's absolutely terrible. I mean, especially shutdown. I feel like fight and flight are an upgrade from shutdown. Like shutdown mode feels awful.
That's
and like
like
I want to
death.
talk about it for a little bit, if that's
Yeah,
cool with you.
please
Okay.
do.
Because, you know, there's like, we have our parasympathetic, but this is like when the parasympathetic is like too on, you know, and it's like, actually, we need to just like, we need to protect ourselves because we can't fight, we can't flight. And this is an unconscious process is happening. This is happening unconsciously in the split second, milliseconds in your body. This isn't something you have control over and you're like, I'm gonna flee or freeze. You're like, no, your body's like, oh fuck. Like, we cannot fight, we cannot flee. Let's shut down, conserve energy, play dead. Maybe we'll make it through this life threat, but probably not, but I don't know, but let's try to survive. And it sucks because in shutdown mode, and there's some people who say there's like a difference between freeze and shutdown, and like I don't know. I think right now I'm just going to kind of use them more interchangeably because for me it really is a spectrum. It's not this like black and white. You're here, you're there, but there's varying degrees. And so for me, I recognize that I'm going into shutdown mode when I start to get like blurred vision and I can't focus, and then I can't think straight. I like can't even think like. And this can happen in fight or flight too, but those are some indicators. And since my nervous system loves to go into shutdown, I'm like, okay, what's happening? And I can like regulate, come back out before it's too late. But then if my capacity for handling activation and charge in my nervous system has been just, if too many things are happening beyond my capacity, it could be good things, bad things, things related to business, things related to life, just things related to noise and sensations and sounds. It can be all kinds of things. It's not just this one thing or one pathway. My body will be like, we can't handle it. Let's go into shutdown mode. And then I will feel like I'm dead inside. I will feel like there is a wall between me and the world. Like I'm viewing the world between like there's a glass screen, but it's not even clear. It's like a dirty glass that I'm like stuck in and I can't quite get out of. And I feel like I weigh 1,000,000 pounds and I can't move. And like, no matter what I do, nothing will work. So why bother? And those are just some of the things. Like, it is hard and it can show up in so many different ways, and it can take a long fucking time to come out of it too.
Yeah.
Like, shutdown, I think, is one of the hardest places to be. And if anyone's in that, I just send so much compassion and love to you. And I also say, like, there's a way out because I fucking did it. And so many other people have done it. And it takes time. For me, it took time and a lot of learning and somatic care. And it's still a journey. Sometimes I still go into that. And then I'm like, oh, I just can come out of it so much quicker, or recognize it and stop it, recognize it at that kind of like freeze, confusion, dissociation mode, and then come back into regulation before going into the full on like life preservation mode of shutdown. So I think this is a lot of people, you know, you talk about this procrastination and you talk about, what are some of the other things? Because I know you've talked about like procrastination and why can't I just do this? Like a lot of that, and like what's happening there, especially if you're in that mode, like overriding that is just sometimes you have to just like survive or feed the kids or whatever, take the dog on a walk, and it feels like a zombie. I told this to a client the other day. I was like, in that mode, what can help me is even a little bit of movement, not so much that I overcharge myself, but even like, what can you do that you can do as a zombie and do that? Not to like try to like zombie, like move, like exercise your way out of it or anything. But like I just mentioned, I was like a zombie vacuuming, you know, like what can you do to just move your body a little bit? That helped me a lot. And it's gonna be different for everyone, but I don't know. Shutdown mode, I just send out all the hearts and compassion and love and like thawing for people who are in there because it sucks.
Yeah. So, something I want to just add to that is I was just talking about this with a client of mine the other day, and what you're describing is almost word for word what she was also describing.
Wow.
Plus, if you add in a layer of like naps,
Oh,
Like,
definitely. I mean, my parents called me slug and sloth as a child, and I didn't realize until I learned about somatics and the nervous system that I wasn't actually lazy, and that there wasn't actually something wrong with me inherently.
Yes.
I was in shutdown mode my whole fucking life.
Yes.
And now slugs and sloths are like my allies and pals. I'm like, yes, let's slug, let's sloth. Like, when, you know, like they're a part of a healthy cycle of living is doing that. But like when you're stuck in that, like, and the naps and the feeling like even if you sleep, you never got enough sleep. It's awful. It's awful.
Yeah. And so I want to just talk about that a little bit.
Sure.
Because I think that a lot of people do this. They do this like talk of like, you're lazy, Natalie. You just get up and do it. You know, you just need to. Yeah, you just need to hustle. And the example that I gave my client is like, if you imagine you are a cruise ship on this like trajectory, cruise ships don't really take too many turns, right?
I've never been on one.
Yeah, I have never been on a cruise ship either, but I imagine that there's not a whole lot of turning.
I've seen a lot of tankers because I grew up on the Chesapeake Bay, so
so big tanker, big cruise ship, whatever big boat it is,
big boat.
And I think that a lot of people early on in life, like you think about what was the earliest age that you were asked, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Right.
Like I can tangibly remember 5, you know? And so as human beings, we pick this path and we start going on this path, this like straight line, and it has all this weight and all this momentum behind it. And when we start getting something in a lot of times it's in our bodies first. When I'm working with people, it's like, I don't feel right. I'm depressed. I'm anxious all the time.
Yeah.
Think about how much momentum you have to slow down, right? And for you to make any kind of turning motion in a tanker, you're going to have to slow way the fuck down.
Oh, yeah.
And then make the turn. And then it's also hard to like gain that momentum back up again.
And you need the space too. Like you can't go turning in a tiny river.
Exactly.
You need a lot of space.
Yeah. And so to me, that's why it was so important that BAM be as long as it is.
Yes.
Is because this really tender space of making a transition in your work, because so many of us are so entrenched and identified with our work, like it needs time, it needs space, it needs permission to slow down, permission to turn, and then permission to take your time gaining speed back up again. And so I look at all these programs that are like, I can teach you how to like get your 10K in 30 days. And I'm like, oh, that's a whole lot of override that's happening in that program.
Right. And probably a lot of disappointed customers.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've taken one of those courses, and the funny thing about that is it was a 3-month program. And I did get the 10K month, like within the space of that container. But because there was no conversation about regulation, there was no conversation about nervous system, there was no conversation about like, are you ready to receive? Like I blacked out that month. I swear, like not actually like fainting, but like, I don't know where the 10K went. Like I spent 10K and I have no idea where it went. At the end of the month, I was like, I'm in exactly the same position I was in last month. And I think that this is where that like story of like, is it safe to receive? Like has to be integrated before you start having these successes.
Oh yeah.
And when you start having these successes, something that we don't talk about too is like, how that can also be dysregulating.
Oh, totally.
Like receiving the good and getting the thing that you've been wanting to, like that you've been working for so long can also feel super dysregulating. And so if you have a community that understands that and can hold space for that and normalize that for you,
yeah,
like that is like such deep medicine there.
Definitely. The community and the one-to-one support. And, you know, for me, like receiving was a life threat. It was like, if you receive, you're just going to make your caretaker's more miserable because you're taking from them and they don't even have enough. And so you're just even more the cause of their problems, and they're probably going to abandon you and you're going to die. You know, like receiving was like, do not receive at all costs so you can stay alive, which is like so not logical. I mean, it's like logical in this illogical loop, but in reality check, no, not logical.
Yeah. So I think that when we start looking at things from a trauma-informed lens, we start seeing that our bodies have like these deep, deep core needs that we aren't really addressing in businesses.
Oh, no.
If anything, like we're asked to like put your emotions to the side and don't worry about that feeling and
push through it. You love this one, feel the fear and do it anyway.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
yeah. No, I hate that one. So I think that as we start, I really feel like there's like a collective shift. Towards this. And as we all collectively start shifting towards being trauma aware, you know, integrating these ethical and trauma-informed practices into your business, it's going to change how business looks 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now. You know, even just in my own business, like life is so different. Just when did I start Empowered Curiosity? Back in 2019. And I feel like the pandemic has really shifted people's ideas on like what work can look like. And the space is ripe for us to come into these places and start offering collective healing and help, because there's a lot of hurt people out there. And you're going to help somebody really, really differently than how I'm going to help somebody. And so I don't view anybody in this space as being a threat, unless you're doing something where I'm like, you're hurting your people. Then I go a little bit mama bear. But we need more people.
Oh my God, yes.
On this revolution.
On this cruise trip.
We need more people on this cruise ship. We're going to have fun here.
And this isn't a normal cruise ship. This is like a very, it's not overwhelming. And the staff are also in luxurious accommodations. And also, I don't know that cruise ships are like the best analogy to use, because like they're very not eco-friendly. But I would not, I'm not, no, anyone who loves cruises, that's cool. But it is like, I'm terrified of going. And like, it's so not aligned with me. And I don't know, we could take that out. I don't know, but maybe we could just take out the whole cruise ship analogy from the past minute.
So, Natalie, I'm curious, because we've been working together since November of 2021. And like, what does life look like now? Like, what does this trauma-informed business that you have look and feel like? I think feeling is the more important part here.
Yeah. Well, I'm like, how many hours do we have? I think the first thing would be that way less pressure. I mean, I've been carrying so much pressure. I mean, it's a lot of pressure to walk around with that story I was walking around with like, I have to like, you know, I'm responsible for people's misery and I'm the cause of their misery and da-da-da-da-da. Like, that's a lot of pressure. So way less pressure, a lot more ease, inspiration, creativity. It's been, you know, as any trauma healing journey is, it's been ups and downs, and it's not like, oh my God, I'm so much better. And then I was like, I always feel amazing. It's like, no, I feel my baseline is like way less pressure, way more ease, way more creativity, way more freedom, way more spaciousness and flexibility. And the intense, you know, I've been able to move through some really intense things way faster. And yeah, my because it's not just my business that looks different, it's my life. It really is. Because like working with my therapist for a year and a half, and then bringing you on board, and also working with my husband and his therapist in couples therapy, you know, once you came on board and once I was, you know, working with him and our couples therapy, it was like, boom, like something shifted. A major, major integration happened around that core story of I'm the cause of other people's misery and receiving money isn't safe. And this happened for me in about January of 2022. And once that happened, that's when things really changed. I felt suddenly completely supported and safe in earning money and in being in control of my money and in like, I don't know, having the flexibility and authority to actually share what I'm good at and help people without solving their whole life, you know, like this big integration really, it took a long time. And then the pieces with your help and my therapist's help and couples therapy fell into place. And within a week of, there was like a moment that this happened. And within a week of that, I was all of a sudden had started a new business I never planned on. You know, I was like, that's when I started doing, clients came out of the woodwork out of nowhere. I mean, this is like the living universe and co-creation happening. I think co-creation is tied to regulation and healing that dysregulation, because that opens up doors of what you're open to and what you're able to see and what the universe brings you. Within a week of that, I had multiple clients. I had reached my income goal for my month, and I was like doing this really fun, amazing coaching work with messaging and marketing for clients. And wow, it just was everything. I was like, I feel alive. And for the next few months, I felt more alive than I ever felt in my life before. I was like, oh, this is what it feels like to be alive. Like I thought I had felt alive before, but I had felt alive within the context of like shutdown mode.
Yeah.
So I was like, no, this is what it feels like to just truly, like I had touched this place of aliveness and had delicious moments in my life. This was like months of aliveness and just ease and having such an expanded capacity to move through challenges. I mean, I felt like, I was like, wow, all of my years of struggle are worth it for this like taste of aliveness. This was the sweet nectar of life. I mean, I don't even know how to say it without sounding so stupidly cheesy, but really. And then, you know, after that for a little while, you know, I was kept making money and I kept being able to get clients and collaborate and do things. And I'm still doing it, and I'm booked out through mid-September. I've been booked out through mid-September since like June. And yeah, I just feel so much more free and able and spacious. And some other deep trauma came up now that I was in this space of like, wow, that was a nice relief. Some other deep trauma came up that I worked through with my therapist. And instead of it taking a year and a half, it took a month and a half. And I was like, wow, that was cool. That was cool to be able to like move through this really intense charge of this pattern I've been carrying for decades and be integrated in like a month and a half. And like also our work together helps support that too. But you know, that trauma didn't directly relate to business at the time. I mean, everything's interconnected. You pull one thread, you pull them all, but there was just, it's so different. Also, in our sessions together, I discovered my love of bunnies, and I started, and how I've always loved bunnies, and how I started volunteering with rescue bunnies, and they have also changed my life. I fucking love bunnies so much. So that's a nutshell. I mean, does that cover what you were?
Yeah. And I want to throw one more thing in there that I've been really impressed with.
Okay.
Just watching you is how you have embodied boundaries in such a different way.
Yeah.
You know, like you and I are very, very different, obviously. Even just like in the human design world, I don't know that anybody can really keep up with like manifesting generators unless you're a manifesting generator.
No way, dude.
And so like, there's no way that I would want to overlay, you know, my work schedule, because that's what feels good to me, onto you. And what I've been so impressed with is you have been so protective of your energy because you value it differently now. And you're like, I only want to see X amount of clients per month. And I'm not going beyond that. Because as soon as I go beyond that, then I know that A, my feelings start going into resentment. B, my body starts feeling it. C, I start to not like the work that I do. And so when you start valuing these parts of your life that you didn't really value in the same capacity before, your actions look really, really different. And it's been so wonderful to watch you embody those boundaries in a way that is so strong and not coming from a place of like, fuck you, like stay away from me, but it's coming from a place of like, this is what my needs are. And I'm allowed to have needs. And not only am I allowed to have needs, but I'm going to stand up for my needs in ways that are kind to both you and me.
Definitely. And you've been really helpful in helping me vision and create business structures that support that, even though they look wildly different from what kind of quote normative business looks like. And building those business structures that work to earn enough income to support myself, but also be well within my capacity. So I'm not getting triggered into shutdown mode and I still have energy left to enjoy my life. That's huge. That's like my prayer. Like these are the prayers I've been prayed for. And then when, you came along, there was a resonance of what I've been asking for. I was like, she's going helps. And you helped. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to circle back to something that you've touched on a lot over the course of this conversation, which is you've been working with a somatic therapist this whole time.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And something that I want to be really clear with is like everyone is allowed to choose the support systems that they need. And so signing up and doing some of the nervous system regulation, some of the trauma work and all these things that we do in BAM does not mean that you have to pull away from the support that you already have and that exists in your life. But I'm curious, as somebody who did both the somatic therapy alongside BAM, what was different and what did you get out of both of those modalities that you couldn't have gotten from the other?
Yes, totally. In therapy, my therapist is focused on, we discuss business, but she's always looking at business when it comes up. She's not looking at my story. She's looking at my nervous system. Like she's very focused on like it's like a hone in nervous system. And she asks questions about the story that, really go deep into, we talk a lot about family dynamics, and it's different. I've been thinking about this a lot. I'm like, what is different? And even though I have all of this nervous system support with my therapist, I needed someone who could hold that space for me through the lens of business. And it's really hard to articulate what that is or how, but she didn't understand. She obviously runs a business because she's a therapist and she does amazing therapy. But when we got together, she wasn't necessarily like there to hear about the things I want to talk about in business. Like, here's my offer. Here's what I want to offer. Here's like what I'm like, I could bring what I'm struggling with in business to her, but she just doesn't have that lens and she's not looking for those stories. And I think, it's important in therapy, like, yes, stories plus nervous system, but like in business, I needed someone who could really hold that container and understand what I was talking about.
Yeah.
Around business and to be able to deeply look into what I was doing in my business, not just through the lens of what's happening in my body, but through both lenses of what's happening in my body and what are those childhood stories. And here's like some approaches to business and structure and that that might inform you or that you might be able to try or Like, I just needed that. I needed something more, something with that business angle and that I could just nerd out in my business mental cognitive capacity as well. And my therapist is very much not that, you know, like,
Yeah.
she's very focused on these, just the core patterns, and that's what we do.
Yeah. Yeah. And as you're speaking, like, it's helping me sort of crystallize like why I love what I do, which is we spend a lot of time, especially in the first few months, of like getting into your traumas and getting into like your somatic experiences, and, you know, how did this relationship to money, how does that go back to your family? And like a lot of that stuff you can do with a therapist, alongside a therapist, additional support, all of that.
Yep.
And for me, it's not just about like leaving it there. Like I'm not going to share the details of what we talked about in our last session, but our last session was a lot of brainstorming.
Yeah.
Right. And to me, I get really excited when I see that somebody has done that trauma integration, and now they're like, okay, how do I create a trauma-informed business for my clients, and also a trauma-informed business for me as a business owner and as a practitioner? Because a lot of the things that we were talking about was around like, okay, so I want to do this thing, and how do I protect and make sure that I don't overexert my energy in doing this thing, right? And so then we can create an offer around that thing that feels so deeply nourishing to you because it's not depleting your energy, and it's also going to be of the highest value for your clients. And I think that this is where I start to see like, oh, these ripples go beyond just like, oh, now you're, you know, a more well-balanced person. It's like, now you have a business, which now is going to ripple out to your clients. And when they feel like they have that safety and that nervous system regulation because they've worked with you, then, you know, it's almost like by transitive property. I don't know if that's the right word, but like I get to see the like downstream effects because I'm seeing it actually tangibly showing up in how you do your offers and how you price your work, how you show up for your clients, like all of that. And so for me, I don't want it to just stay in the realm of like, you feel better.
Right.
I want you to take this and share your magic with the world so that you are helping other people feel better as well.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think another thing too is in that is like, you're able to brainstorm and you're able to share, like there's, I guess for good reason. I mean, I'm not going to totally poo-poo it, but like in therapy and licensed therapy, you know, there's a very specific client-therapist relationship. And I know hardly anything about my therapist's life. You know, I know she has some kids and a dog, and where she lives and da-da-da, but like, I know a little bit about her story, but I don't know, you know, I don't know. And to me, it's really, really helpful to know people. Like, it's just real to me. And I wish that I could know more about my therapist. And I, you know, just being able to actually like know you and for you to know me and see my business and for us to be able to engage in ways that I'm legally not allowed to with my therapist, I think has allowed for parts of me to be seen and held in a deeper way than I could be with my therapist. And I don't feel like it's crossed any borders because you have very clear, well-held boundaries in yourself and your work versus life. And in, you know, you're very regulated in your nervous system and are able to show up in that way. And so it doesn't, I mean, I know for me, it doesn't feel like our, you know, going beyond the kind of bounds of what a licensed therapist provides and being able to engage in life with each other. Yeah. That was so enriching. Like that's, I feel like I really would love to know more about my therapist and her as a humanized person instead of just this like amazing person that I cherish and I'm so grateful for. And, but I want to like know about her as a person too. And yeah.
Yeah. And
that's big.
And thank you for that.
Yeah.
And that feels good for me to receive because I think that I want to be transparent about who I am because I've lived a life where I've been stuck in hustle culture, and I've ascribed to a lot of things that didn't serve, and a lot of ways in which capitalism has leaked into being toxic in my life too. And so if I can show people through how I approach my business and through how I approach my life that something can be different, I'm hoping that it'll inspire people to start questioning these things in their own life. You know?
Yeah.
You don't
also you provide a model for what's possible.
Mm-hmm. And my life is fucking weird. Like, you don't have to live the life that I live, because I live in a trailer with my tiny dog and my boyfriend. But, you know, like, I'm not saying that you need to live my life, but I think that just helping you see that life can look really different from the prescribed narrative that we've all been given and that I personally have lived. You know, I wish that somebody had shown me that life could be happy and life could be different.
Oh my God, yes. And like a more complete picture than just like the 60 minutes or 53 minutes that you're together in a session, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That whole, I don't feel like me seeing you when you've been in hardship or facing something, or, you know, like, I don't know, this is a whole tangent about like the rules of therapists and not being able to like share their life more intimately. Like, I get it, because humans are messy and weird. And,
well, I will say that I do have one big boundary around that transparency.
Yeah.
Which is when I'm in my role as a coach, and I think about my role as a coach in whatever format we're in, whether that's in Instagram or newsletter or sitting in session with you or being on a BAM group ceremony with you, I will be completely authentic and real about everything in my life that I'm in regulation about. I don't share these things that I'm in dysregulation about, not because I want to hide these parts of myself, or not because I'm scared of being seen as imperfect. Like, you know, I'm very, very imperfect. But to me, when I'm sitting in my coach seat, I'm here to mirror regulation for you.
Yeah.
And so if I come into those spaces with a dysregulation in my life, then I'm asking you to hold space for me.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And that's not fair. And I ask for my inner circle, so my partner, my best friends, my dog, and I ask them to hold me in regulation. And also like the therapists and coaches that I work with as well, the professionals that I work with, that's their role. And so, yes, I will share everything about my life as long as I feel regulated enough to share about it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And I think that's like, I wish that was the rule for therapy too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe it is. Maybe I'm not up enough on the law or something, but that makes a lot of sense. And
or maybe your therapist has like
her own boundaries.
Yeah. Which is totally fair. Like, we all get to choose what boundaries feel good for us.
Totally.
And this is just the boundary that I found works for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I love that. Yeah. And you know, a coach versus therapy, like therapy doesn't necessarily have an end goal. And I think coaching is more of a container. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that's really useful too, of like therapy. Like, I'm probably just going to be in therapy the rest of my life. I'll probably also have a coach at some degree on and off for the rest of my life too, because it's amazing. Like, coaching is awesome. But there's more of a focus. And it's not a focus of like, let's push and effort ourselves toward this, but it's like, here's why we're doing this work together. Yeah. Versus like, let's just explore your dynamics and see how we can help you. Like, you know? So I think this coaching versus therapy, like, they're very complementary. And I agree. Absolutely love having both and having the privilege to have both too.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, my dear, is there anything else that you want to layer in? I just want to check in with you. You covered a lot.
Always. I know. There's so much. Yeah, thanks. I love it too. I think I guess something I would want to say is, you know, you're doing another round of BAM, and if anyone's feeling called to this or has maybe been called to other programs because of hype or because of FOMO or because of whatever, like I know this for me, and I kind of mentioned this earlier, but for me, I'm someone who just is really turned off by the kind of hype machine and the popularity machine and the like, let's be really energized. Like that just doesn't do it for me because it's way overstimulating and activating for me. And I'm still get excited. I mean, you've seen me like nerd out and get excited here. I'm not like a wet rag on the floor.
Yeah.
But for anyone who's kind of like either felt really wanted to join those things or did, but found them overwhelming and they couldn't actually like engage, or they've been like, I don't know, just caught in that loop.
This question?
Yeah. You want to frame it? Yeah.
So, Natalie, full disclosure, folks, there is a new round of BAM coming up, and we are launching in August, and I'm taking connection calls all of August, and we begin in the middle of September of 2022. And Natalie, as somebody who has graduated from BAM, I'm curious, what would you tell somebody who's kind of curious about BAM versus other programs that are out there? Because there's a lot out there.
Yes. And this is huge because so many programs are built on FOMO. People sign up because of FOMO, because of all the hype and fun energy and like whatever, and like big promises that the host is offering. And for some people that works great. If that's you and you love that energy, you can ride with it, go, and it works for you, go with it. But for me, that turns me way off. I am like, no, thank you. This is too activating, too overwhelming. I know my own capacity, and I am not going to be able to like keep up with this like hype energy that they have. And that's probably, you know, their approach is probably rooted in this like energy, be none, and like that is not my thing. And so for anyone who feels that way, if you feel like Kat is someone who can hold space for you in a way that isn't over energizing, then I would say, yes, that is probably true, because that was the case for me. And something I love about the way BAM was structured, about the length of it and about the pace of it and about the content and the way that support was provided one-to-one and in a group over 9 months, is that it was spacious enough for me to move through and experience results in my capacity in a way that was able to be integrated and sustainable for going ahead the rest of my life, probably. Like, this is huge. This isn't just let's put all of this energy in and then burn out and then wonder why it didn't work. Like, no, for me, this was not that. Mm-hmm. And of course, I am one person and you are your own self. And if you trust how you're feeling, and trust, like, not just in BAM, but like in all programs, when you're looking at them, you're like, oh, this is going to be way too, like, I don't know if this is going to be sustainable for me or in my capacity. And versus like, how do you feel with the person who's leading it, and what are they going to have you do? And are you on board with that? And like, trust that in yourself. And I love BAM because of the pace, because of the spaciousness, but also because of the depth of support and because of the energy that, Kat as a space holder brought to it. That's the energy I needed. It was what was going to help me do what I needed to do to move through to the other side of whatever I was stuck on. And so if all that hype or FOMO or popularity, you're like, let's be energized and on and zany or whatever all the time. Like, if like, it's fun to be zany. I'm weird as shit and I have fun, but like, I am not that all the time. And I don't like to be on all the time. It's just not for me. If that isn't for you, definitely consider BAM.
All the warm fuzzies.
Yay, good.
Yeah. And I think that you named something in there that I think is really important to name as well, which is people are going to move through this program at the capacity that they can that they're at,
Yeah.
right? And so you happen to be one of my case studies, and, you know, like I think you've shared, you've made, you know, X amount times what the investment for BAM was already.
I've already got like earned back at least 5 times the investment, and that's, you know, program just ended.
Yeah. But I was meeting you in a place where like really like we could just sort of tip that ship, to just use that ship analogy again, and you could be on your way. There's other people in BAM who are leaving like lifetime career jobs in order to put their energy and their love into what they considered to be their side hustle. So while they may not have the like quote unquote tangible results that you have, like they are also still reporting so much in terms of aligning with their work, understanding what their purpose is, understanding that their business is going to tap into like a deeper purpose than their old job, understanding like all of the frameworks of how to build an ethical business are still there, so that as their ship turns around, they can just have this clear path forward instead of being, you know, sucked into another like dysregulating pattern.
Right. Recreating that system that they're trying to get out of.
Exactly. And so I'm not going to be here like saying, like one of the coaches that I've taken before, of like, you'll have a 10K month by the end of the 3 months that we work together. But what I can promise is that there's this deeper level of integration that's going to serve you not just in your business. Like your business, I call business being a spiritual practice because like if we can integrate these lessons that business is showing us and we can step through them as portals, everything in your life changes. And so to look at your business from this space, like your business actually ends up becoming your medicine as well. So I just want to like name that piece because I think it was an important piece that you shared around it. Like the length of the container gave you the capacity to evolve at the speed that you needed to evolve at.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And I love that, like, you know, to use that tanker analogy, I love that because like people really have come in with decades of experience and degrees and training, and they're like, wait, this isn't really a fit for me. And I'm kind of the same. Like I had built a business based on my Tao in a certain way, but not totally, like based on my purpose, based on what I love. And I actually really do love Earthspeak and the business I built. I had just built it in a way that recreated the very things I was trying to get out of in building that. And just because it was a business rooted in my purpose, it didn't mean that it was rooted in regulation. And that was huge for me. And, you know, finding that regulation through the lens of business did help me actually drop the things that weren't actually aligned that I thought were, because it made sense on paper. Or, you know, and all those things that I did, they got me here. It was actually the business, Earthspeak, and what we did in Earthspeak is literally what connected me to you and me to somatics and helped me on my path. Like I needed it to get here, I think.
And also the messaging and the communications piece.
Exactly.
Like that was a massive piece of our Earthspeak.
Exactly. Like it was a huge part of this journey. And it was really hard to be like, this doesn't fit anymore. And like have this huge community that I'm like, I'm not doing this anymore. Sorry. Or like, we have to change. Like that's really freaking hard. But it's harder to stay in something that doesn't fit than to leave and to grow a new shell, find a new shoe, whatever. Like that it's, you know, if you're someone that's at that point and there's some part of you that knows this, like what is going to be harder? Staying in that thing that doesn't fit, or making the changes and going through some of the hard stuff to eventually be in that space of actually wearing the glove that fits and feeling really good in your life. Like that's, you know, that's what we kind of are giving up by just staying in what doesn't fit just because we don't know what else to do.
Yeah.
So yeah,
absolutely.
I could go on and on and on and on and on about this.
Well, my dear, I'm going to ask you to to share your socials and how people can find you in just
Sure.
a moment. But I also just want to share what my experience working with you has been.
Thank you.
Because I've hired you to help me with writing the BAM sales page. Like I've said, you are teaching several modules of BAM at this point. And
I'm a BAMmer.
Yep. And I love that you've tapped into this work because you have helped me in clarifying my message. So I know how to write copy. I know how to connect with people, and having a third person come in as a consultant and be like, okay, so we can order it this way. That's different from how I would have ordered it. Or have you thought about it in this way? I think it's always so valuable to just get out of your own head and allow somebody to look at the pieces that you hold so tender and so dear to you and give you compassionate and objective feedback that is actually going to help you connect even better with your audience. I've invested thousands of dollars in your services, and I love that I get to invest thousands of dollars in your services. Because it's all circulatory, right? I want to make money in my business so that I'm supporting more people like you and other spiritual entrepreneurs, because quite frankly, I trust you more than I trust Amazon. And my level of trust in having somebody touch my business, I don't think I've shared this with you, but actually Nadine, who's going to be helping me coach this next cycle of BAN, was asking me, are there any business related coaches or people that you feel super strongly aligned with? And I really couldn't think of very many people, and you were on that list.
Ooh, I'm honored.
Just because I wouldn't just give the reins over to how I communicate with my people to just anybody. And so if there is any sort of twinkling of, should I work with Natalie? Go chat with Natalie and just give her a little bit of an opening and a peek into your business. You're going to just be astounded by what she can open up. So I know that, Nat, you're going to have a ton of new offerings coming out. And I just want to encourage people to just be involved in your Instagram feed or your newsletter, however you're collecting that data and connecting with your people, because as soon as your stuff hits the ground running, I just want to send people into your space because it's going to be so helpful. So now you're allowed to share your social media things.
Thanks for that, Kat. It's super awesome to hear that. And, I'm super grateful to do this work with you and with the other amazing clients, because being able to help you all to help more people really is that ripple effect you were talking about earlier. And I see it as I'm so oriented in fungi and mushrooms, and I have a master's degree in soil science and studied microbes in the soil and fungi. And, I feel like we're each little spores, and as we sporulate and float out or whatever, and reach new soil and colonize it, because colonize is a dirty word in in the world, but actually in biology and in mushrooms and fungi that are growing mycelia that help, move nutrients from plant to plant and help actually protect and create resilient ecosystems. It's very important. And so it doesn't have to be this dominating thing. It's actually this interconnected thing. So
yes.
We're like little spores, and then we go out and we grow our own little spore networks. We grow our mycelia, our mushroom fungal bodies, and then we mushroom and sporulate, mushroom and sporulate. I hope that made sense. I'm a total nerd for this stuff, for nature stuff, but yeah, it's so rad. We together, you and me and the people that we work with, really are part of creating this change, this systemic change that we want to see in the world. And so thank you for that. So, I work with people who are change makers in their businesses, through their businesses, who are helping other people to on a personal level or on a systemic level through, working one-to-one with people or working with organizations. I help you clarify your messaging and really align your marketing with ways that are aligned with your energy and your capacity. And I'm also in training for somatic experiencing, which is to be certified in somatic experiencing, which is a really powerful trauma healing modality by Peter Levine. And I incorporate this into our work, and I approach everything from that trauma informed lens through the nervous system of like, how are you as a business owner and marketer, how are you feeling as you move through your messaging, and what kind of things are coming up for you? And we don't do it's not therapy. I'm helping people, be more regulated in their marketing and messaging, in their nervous system as their marketing and messaging. But then also, okay, how do we put that into practice? What are the actual words? What are the messages? What are the approaches? How are you going to reach the people? What are you going to say? And what are you inviting them to? And how do you make that invitation, AKA your offer, so clear that the people who are aligned are just like, yes, duh. Like, why wouldn't I sign up for this? Like, this is exactly what I've been looking for.
Yeah.
And so it's fun. It is so fun. And right now I'm mostly helping people one-to-one with a really beautiful package where we work on your offers, and then we work on your messaging and your marketing. And I teach you how to actually just create messages and marketing materials that really align for you and vibe with the people and attract the people you're meant to serve. And they're fun in the process. So yeah, you can find all that at natalie.net. Natalie.net, natalie.net. Sign up for my newsletter. I'm actually not so active on Instagram right now. Most of my marketing comes through networking, and but I do like to play on Instagram. So if you're on Instagram, you can find me at Natalie Ross Media, all one word, or personally at natalie.alexandra.ross. And then my other business, EarthSpeak, we will still, it still offers so many resources. So if that stuff I was talking about before will lit you up and you're like, ooh, I want to discover more of that, there's hundreds of podcast episodes you can go listen to for free. EarthSpeak podcast, you can go at EarthSpeak on Instagram and find all the links and whatever. So yeah, I'm all over the place there. You can find whatever angle you want to go in.
You are very findable on the web. Yeah,
find me. I'm here. And I'm hanging out, shoot me an email, whatever. I'm super open to connecting.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't really clear from our conversation, folks, the doors for BAM are open, and come hit me up. We can do a connection call, just get a sense of who you are, what your business is like, and what's coming up for you. And if we're a good fit, then I'd love to see you in BAM. So that is all at empoweredcuriosity.com, and we'll see you soon.
I'll see you in BAM too, y'all. Can't wait.